How's it going, everybody? I want to talk to you guys a little bit about SRv6 and the small lab that I built out for it. This is actually my third attempt at recording this video because I wanted to make sure I had gone through all the more than likely questions that I would probably get from recording content about SRv6 and the issues that I ran into and the troubleshooting that I did and all that type of stuff, so that it would be, as concise as I can possibly make it. So I've been going through a refresh of my CCNP service provider. So I've had a CCNP service provider certification now for almost 10 years. I got it not long after I passed route switch, and my intention was to go get my service provider CCIE shortly thereafter, after I had refreshed all my, I had gotten my NP and service provider, and then went that route with it. But didn't work out that way. So long story short, I spent a lot of time going through other areas, and several years later, here I am. I'm committing myself to getting more CCIEs. It's personal goal of mine. There's really no professional outcome for it. Like, I don't get like $30,000 more per year in salary. I'm doing it because I genuinely enjoy doing it. So it gives me something to do. I learn new technologies, that type of stuff. So my goal is to have a line of plaques above my head. So it'll take some time, but I like doing this. I like learning new stuff and stuff like that. So like I said, I got my NP and service provider 2016 sometime. I think it was towards the end of the year, but over time, my understanding and knowledge in that area has kind of atrophied. And so what do you do when you don't remember a lot of it, or you still understand it at a high level, but like into the weeds, you would I don't remember. You do a refresh. So that's what I've been doing for the past several months, has been refreshing my CCNP and service provider, writing a workbook for it, because I took some feedback from the channel that I had gotten about how I had started some projects, and they kind of fall by the wayside. Either I lose motivation, get distracted by other things, stuff doesn't get completed. So I'm using the workbook development and building the workbook as a way to stay on task and complete something I say I'm going to go do. So part of that is writing the workbook. So I'd say the bulk of the workbook is complete. It's probably 75%. One of the last topics to cover was segment routing, and specifically SRv6. I've gone through a fair amount of segment routing, both SRMPLS and SRTE. So I'm generally familiar with how that stuff works, and the labs have been built in the workbook for that. So all of that stuff is pretty much squared away. So I started diving into SRv6 because other things like IP routed multicast, inter-AS VPNs, a lot of that stuff I had already knocked out labs for and had built them. So there's some IPv6 transition stuff that I still have to do, and stuff like that. But I was like, I really wanted to dive into SRv6 because I really haven't done that. I've been reading the books on it. As you can see, I've up in the tabs here, I've got quite a few tabs open, and I'm going to show you guys kind of how to navigate to the documentation and what you should read up on, and then the exams on what exactly it is that you should be knowledgeable on when it comes to SRv6. So obviously, if I rewind about 3 weeks, I stood up a very basic SRv6 lab in Eve, and it looks something like this. Actually, I'm going to flip over this one because the brightness is starting to bother me. As I do know you can change I think it's tools, you can do, where is it, admin, settings, yeah, anyway. I know there's a way you can change the, what do you call it? Oh, there we go, dark. That's what I was looking for. Home. There, that's better. It's darker. Anyway, so I started off in Eve with SRv6, and I had followed along with both this guy right here. This is the segment routing book. So, like, you got segment routing part 3, SRv6. I've been reading through this book. I've also been looking through the configuration guide for this. So I got the configuration in place, and what was happening was I was getting route exchange between the customer edge devices. It's a typical layer 3 VPN. If you've ever done with an MPLS, you go through, you get your IGP configured so that the provider edges can talk to each other. You get some sort of labeling mechanism. In this case, SRv6 is replacing LDP, and you're doing SRv6 in the IPv6 and SRv6 in the core. There is no IPv4 at all in the core. So you're going through all of that, and VRFs pointing towards the customer edges, multi-protocol BGP, VPMD4, VPMD6 between the provider edges, all that stuff. So the routers were exchanging routes. So all the control plane bits were in place, right? I've configured probably thousands of layer 3 VPNs in a lab up to this point. So I know the process pretty well. Well, I was getting route exchange to happen, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get the data plane to work. So thinking that, so I reached out to, on LinkedIn, if you don't know who he is, Andrew Ohanian. He wrote the SPv5 online workbook, and he covers a lot of technologies and did a really good job on the workbook. So I went through his workbook, and the configurations I was going through, I was like, okay, so following the configs, everything was working from a control plane, but the data plane wasn't working. So I was a little irritated because I had gone through this documentation here. I had gone through all of this, trying to get it up and running, and I was like, okay, so I've got all the configuration in place, but when I would go to test out the connectivity end to end, it wouldn't work. I would get dropped pings. So reached out for some help, went to LinkedIn, asked what people had done. A lot of people had said they had gotten it working in CML. So what did I do? The ESXi server that I've got, it's the Cisco C240. I converted that to CML a couple days ago. Got it working. Got all the configs up and running. As you can see, it's a very, very basic lab, right? And that's where you would start, right? If you're just starting to you're dipping your toes into the water, or you're in the kiddie pool, shallow end of the pool, where you can stand up and you're half out of the water. Well, that's what I'm doing here. I'm just starting to get into SRv6 to try to understand it. There is a caveat when you are dealing with SRv6. You need to understand IPv6 first. If you don't, that's where you need to start. So I got I got IPv6 all working in here, all that good stuff. Got the route exchange to happen, then I went to go do the ping, it failed. So I reached out to Andrew, I said, hey man, I'm having a problem here, I was hoping you could take a look at my config. And so, really, really solid guy. I sent him the configs, and he reviewed them, and then he came back and said, hey, I think your prefix is wrong underneath the locator, because you've got two different prefixes, the way that I had them configured. I was like, okay. So what I ended up doing was adjusting that. So let me go back over here to Eve, and I've got it working in both now. So go ahead and pull up Eve here real quick. And if I come over here to XR1 or XR9K1, this is, and if I do a show version, we can see that we're running 24.3.2, which is one of the latest versions, but it's a different train of code. So, but it's you won't get tested on this in the lab exam because they test you on 7.x code. So CML will give you 7.11 and 24.3. But from what I've gathered, when you're looking at your XR syntax up here, there's a couple different ways that they can do it, right? You got the Cat 8K is what this basically is, but it's running on I'm running this on XR9KV. So SRv6 won't work on XRV. So you can get segment routing and SRTE to work on XRV, but not SRv6. It'll work in a very, very basic implementation, but if you want to get into microsids and stuff like that, which I really haven't taken the time to dive into yet, this is where that comes into play. So this is where that 24 comes into play. So I go down to the ASR9K, and then I click on segment routing, and then it brings you to this. So the syntax is the same, right? There's no change in the syntax. So I got all the details for that working. I was like, okay, cool. So that's working in that direction. So what I did was reach out to Andrew. He helped me out. And so if I do a show run segment routing, you'll see here that my locator was different. And this right here is the prefix. And if you do a show run interface loopback 0, they're usually the same. So from my testing, and granted, I am just getting started with SRv6. From my testing, this number right here, this 2001:10::1, needs to be the same number here. And as long as they are, then you'll be able to propagate the communication and stuff like that. So now, Andrew and I have been chatting back and forth, and it seems like that you can use a different prefix as long as the prefix is global, and then on all of your PE routers fall underneath the same pool, the same block, you should be okay. So I was like, I haven't monkeyed around with that yet. I just got this working the other day, and with travel and stuff like that, with work and going out of town for personal reasons, I haven't had a chance to really dive into it any further than that. Long story short, where this really comes into play here is making sure that your prefix that you use for your locator lines up with your loopback. I found that to be what functions. Now, you'll notice that this one here is a /64, and this one here is a /128. This is a loopback address, and if you notice from if you go to the way that MPLS works, as long as the next hop is reachable, you're good to go. So if XR1 was using 10.0.0.1 and XR3 is using 10.0.0.3, and you advertise that into IGP, in this case here we're using IS to IS because SRv6 is not supported with OSPF version 3, so you have to use IS to IS. So if I were to advertise XR1 and XR3's loopbacks, IPv4 loopbacks, into IGP, OSPF, or IS to IS, I would be able to tie that to LDP. LDP would be able to get reachability back and forth, and then I'd be able to do VPNv4 and VPNv6 over the top of that, and then route exchange would work. So it's a little bit different with SRv6 because you're not using the label block that you would see in MPLS and SR. MPLS and SR actually use the same label range. It's 0 through it's like 1,050,000, I think, is what the number comes out to be. I actually do know the number off the top of my head, but it's not really that important for you guys to know that. Regardless, though, the way that that's how labeling works in MPLS and in SR. When you talk SRv6, it uses an IPv6 prefix as your labeling mechanism. So, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole concept of SRv6. It's still pretty new to me, but I wanted to get it up and running so that I could get it configured, and then as I'm reading through the outputs and making sure things are working correctly, I could then be researching things, trying to understand how it all works. This is the one piece that is the least understood when it comes to my understanding of service provider as SRv6. How much will I get tested on in the lab exam? I have no idea. My assumption is I will probably get a little bit of SRv6, but probably not a lot. So my goal right now is to just focus on what I've got going on right now, and taking the basics that I've got now and then just expanding on them. So my plan is to go through if I come back over here, my plan is to go through all of these different options. I've done IPv4 and IPv6 layer 3 VPN. Then it would be, you know, active standby redundancy using port active mode, global v4, v6, eVPN, virtual private wire service, type 5 support, interworking gateway. So I plan on going through all of these, but right now all I've done is these two right here. And so when I skipped over FlexAlgo, TILFA, and micro loop avoidance, because those are IGP enhancements. So, and how you do traffic engineering, so you would do high availability, is what this would be. So I haven't dove into any of this stuff. To me, I get, the way I would go about doing it, which is how I've done it, is get IGP working, then get the service stood up, and then you can focus on optimizing the core afterwards. Because it's, to me, it's backwards if you're optimizing the core and you don't have any services to try to put in fast convergence. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So that's why I've done it the way that I'm doing it. I will eventually go back to FlexAlgo, TILFA, and then micro loop avoidance a little bit down the road. So that's what I've done. Now, I'm not going to be taking SRv6 very far. And so to the level that I've done it is probably as far as I'm going to take it for CCNP. Now, on the exam for SP Core, for MPLS and segment routing, it does call out locator, microsegment, encapsulation, and interworking gateway. So I will be doing a demo of IPv4 and IPv6 layer 3 VPN with SRv6 and going through that. I'm not going to be taking it any further for CCNP because part of the workbook that I'm doing is taking people that have a CCNA and they want to get their CCNP and service provider. That is the goal. If you want to take things further, then I'm going to recommend that you read up the documentation. I also have the RFC here, so if you want to read the RFC, go dive into the RFC and understand how it's written and how it operates. That's what I would recommend you do. Now, the same thing for routing, for the routing exam. They do basically the same thing, right? Control plane operations, data plane, FlexAlgo, locator, microsegment, encapsulation, and interworking gateway. So, but they also call out tree SID. The tree SID is how you do multicast with segment routing. So, if you look right here, you got segment routing tree segment identifier. So, in order for this to work, you need to have a path computation element or a PCE deployed. So, which is just an XR box running SR, and they have the PCE and the PCC, the path computation client, where it doesn't have, there's a level of abstraction that comes into play. I haven't dove very far into it. So if you want to know about the tree SID, I would suggest you go dive into that. Now, that's my CCNP coverage. My CCIE coverage will definitely be covering all of these, and tree SID and all that other stuff that goes along with it. So segment routing is going to be a big chunk of the CCIE workbook and the CCIE videos that I plan on putting out. But right now, I'm coming towards the tail end of the workbook and the refresh for my NP service provider. So that's what I'm working on. So if you want to dive into this stuff, be my guest. So now that I've walked you guys through that and what it is that I did and to fix it, I will go ahead and pull up this and I will do a quick little demo here. So I do have routes going back and forth, and I'll go ahead and get out of the way. If I do a show BGP VPN v4 unicast, I'm learning a couple of routes, right? I've got one coming from 2001:10::3, and if I do a show SEF VRF1 and I pull in this prefix here, one of the things that I wasn't getting before was this output right here, SRv6h.incaps.red SID list. Like I said, I'm still trying to understand how all this stuff works. So I don't know exactly, this is, from what I understand, this is your label. So unlike LDP or SR MPLS where you have a global block, SR MPLS and LDP and even BGP labeling, you are pulling from a block that is a string of numbers, and then you can make different blocks across the board on all the different devices, so you can track which one's which. As far as I understand it, that's not how SRv6 works. So it's one of those things where, as you're diving into it, you need to be cognizant of these details. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, reading through the documentation, labbing things out, trying to understand the details behind it. But this is one of those things that's going to probably take a little bit, and my goal is to try to pull as much information from the documentation as I can to try to wrap my head around it. Probably going to be spending quite a bit of time on Cisco Live, the on-demand library, to try to understand it better, because those are the guys that basically wrote the protocol. So that's where I'm going to be spending my time. So I'm a very basic lab just to get it up and running. I will be extending the lab because that's what I'm going to be doing, because I need to take it deeper. But for the NP service provider, this is probably as far as we're going to get. It's going to be a very basic lab. Now, the provider core nodes, they don't need to run SRv6. They only need to run IPv6. And then it'll just be traditional IPv6 routing in the core. Now, if I come back over here, let me go ahead and get out of the way again. And if I look at CE4, now I literally copied the config from these boxes right here into this topology here, so I can get it up and running. So that's why the host name in the CLI differs from the tab. So if I do a show IP route and I do a trace route to this address right here, I have end-to-end reachability. And you might say, well, I said there's no IPv4 in the core. Well, there technically isn't. Like if I look at XR2, I do a show IP interface brief, the only IP addressing that I have is the actual loopback. So I'm not exactly sure how that's working, but like I said, it is. Now if I do a show IPv6 route, and I do a trace route IPv6 to this address right here, I do this guy right there, and then my source address is this guy. I do yes for the numeric display, and then I have a IPv6 path in the core. So that's how that's working. So all that is operational and doing the job that it's supposed to do. So everything is good there. So this is working in Eve. I'm going to keep the CML deployment in place because I can always add. And as you can see, I've got plenty of resources left on the server. It's just a matter of going through and adding more nodes and things like that. So what are my plans now? Well, actually, if you're just learning this, what would I recommend you do for the exams? I would read up on how all this stuff works. Make sure you understand how the locator, the microsegment, the encapsulation, and the interworking gateway work. And a lot of that information can be pulled from right here. So, for example, if you go under L3VPN, there is an option in under segment routing, I believe it is, you can do a, where is it? We do a encapsulation. You can do an encapsulation source. Right, so underneath here, excuse me, this is an optional command, so you can tell it what source address to pull from. So in this particular case here, what they're showing is that you can deploy this specific prefix SID, and so 2001 DB8:0:82:/64. You're going to be pulling, for every prefix that's learned from the customer, you're going to be associating this as a label, and that's how the labeling is going to be. It's going to be an IPv6 address. Where here they've got the encapsulation source is setting from here. I haven't tested this out yet, so I obviously have no idea how it actually works. But as you can see here, you've got the base block is this. It's a /40, which lines up with what they have configured right here, right? So, but they configured source address configured and the default. So they're going from, and I'm kind of making some assumptions here as to what this actually looks like, because sometimes the documentation is not clear. So, like I said, I'm still getting my toes wet with this because I don't really understand all of it yet. So that's what I would recommend you guys do, is read through this and stuff like that. So there's a lot left to understand about how all this stuff works. So I'm taking my time going through it. All this other stuff is pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot here. Most of the stuff I've already written content for. It's just a matter of going through this. I haven't tried out microsids yet. That's to step beyond where I'm at. So that'll be the next thing that I dive into. So basically that is what I have for you guys in this video. I want to try to keep this one short, but that's what I've got going on. If you guys have any questions, please leave a comment down below. But with that being said, that is what I've got for SRv6 so far. I'm going to go back to studying, and I'll catch all of you in the next one.